So when I was going to college for my degree, I had to take a women's studies class. It wasn't as bad as you might expect. It was about 1/4 male, though the population of that did drop. I think there were about 4 or 5 guys by the end of it, but I did manage to successfully sway a few people's opinions on their policies. The topics of discussion that came up, however, were about one would expect. We ended up discussing healthcare at one point, and one of the students said, "Why do they make pregnant women sit in wheelchairs when they go to the hospital? They're not sick," and received a bunch of nodding heads and grumbles of agreement from the class. She argued it was evidence of misogyny in our culture, by declaring women to be sick when they weren't. Now, since this was in California, I pointed out it was normal to put anyone who walks through the emergency entrance door into a wheelchair. They even try to take you out of the hospital in a wheelchair after you've been declared healthy enough to walk out, which may sound silly, but it's a standard applied to everyone, and thus, I argued, not misogynistic. I also pointed out, even if you're not severely ill, childbirth isn't risk-free. Modern medicine has mitigated many of the risks, but it's still possible to suffer severe damage from the process. I then had to argue against numerous interruptions that medical care should be taken for pregnant women to mitigate said risks, and I had to argue against mostly women on this point. At the time that stood out as strange to me, and over the following weeks I observed the interpretation of feminism being used had shifted from what I viewed it as. The Merriam-Webster definition is the belief that men and women should have equal rights and opportunities, which to me meant whoever has the most merit gets the position because the opportunity was equal. However, the common interpretation seems to have changed to a literalistic approach, including equal job listings, 50% male jobs, 50% female jobs, etc., regardless of merit, under the belief that such a standard of equal employment will artificially create and enforce equal opportunity. So they argued the wheelchairs were misogynistic because my definition of misogyny was wrong. I suggested a flat policy of everyone gets a wheelchair when they enter the emergency room wasn't misogynistic because it was the same for everybody. Most of the class felt this disproportionately affected women, and therefore was misogynistic even if it applied to everyone. I would agree flat standards can be disadvantaging to people they disproportionately affect, but I also don't think it's realistic to make medical exemptions for the idea of cosmic equality. If someone is severely brain damaged and can't drive, yes, they're more disadvantaged by a driving exam than someone that isn't afflicted by that, but there's no realistic way to change that except develop relevant technology to help them. You can't just say drive anyway for the sake of equality. It seems to me this idea of enforced equality holds core that standards can be altered to require a similar level of effort from different people, and that is more fair than a flat standard everyone must meet because of disproportionate buy-in. At first glance, that may seem like a good idea, and in some cases I'd agree. For example, small businesses often have startup costs disproportionate to early revenue for reasons related to local regulations and buying licenses and certificates and doing paperwork, and accordingly I'd agree some standards can use improvement, or a program to help people meet the standard may be helpful. But that's a different way of addressing the issue than just lowering the bar. Advocating medical care for someone so they may be able to pass a driving test is something I'm more in favor of than simply declaring them fit for the road because of quality. It seems to me this model of enforced equality can only really be sustained inside the minds of upper middle class, lower high class people that rarely have to deal with the consequences of it, people that, dare I say, are fairly privileged themselves. It seemed strange to me a bunch of women would argue with me about a wheelchair for someone in an emergency room being classified as misogyny. We can't just waive medical standards. The world doesn't work that way. A lot seem to develop this belief that medical standards and the like can just be changed on a whim, and therefore misogynistic wheelchair is problematic and something we can fix, quote-unquote, by not immediately requiring the soon-to-be childbirthing individual to have it. In the event medical standards should be changed, it should be changed for medical and logistical reasons, in my opinion. In the real world, how many women imminently expecting to go through a birthing process would prefer to stand rather than sit in the wheelchair or be transferred to the gurney or bed? Is the risk of falling over potentially harmful to the parent or child, etc., etc.? In real life, this is a health risk. If you're going to argue the standards are wrong for some reason, or something can be done to help a person meet them, I may even agree with you. But lowering the bar for the sake of equality, especially in the medical field, is hazardous to everyone's health, including people that supposedly benefit from such a policy. It's somehow been defined that requiring medical aid is this shameful lack of independence, even though our entire civilization, is based on cooperation by people taking on different specialized roles. No one person is completely equal to another. No one person has the exact same set of life experiences and skills and perspectives, and no one person has every skill needed to run a civilization. And you know what? That's okay. It's not wrong to go to a doctor because you lack the medical skills to treat yourself. It's not wrong to be a nurse or a teacher. That's not something you should be ashamed of. I'll see you next time. Later, YouTube.